Someone in your life already knows how to control you. They know which words make you defensive. They know when guilt will silence you, when kindness will lower your guard, and when fear will keep you exactly where they want you. The most dangerous part is that they don't need to threaten you. They simply wait for you to react the way you always have. Stop for a second. What if the reason you keep losing to manipulators isn't because they're smarter? What if it's because you've been playing the game exactly the way they expected? Every master manipulator survives on one thing: predictability. The moment they know your emotions, your habits, and your weaknesses, the outcome is no longer a mystery. They've already planned your next move before you've even made it. And while you're trying to win the argument, they're quietly controlling the entire game. Machiavelli understood a truth that most people never discover until it's too late. You don't defeat manipulation by becoming louder, angrier, or more convincing. You defeat it by making the manipulator lose confidence in their own strategy. By the end of this video, you will learn 7 psychological lessons that will help you turn every trap back on the person who created it. And the final lesson is the one experienced manipulators fear the most. Because once you understand it, they'll never be able to play the same game with you again. From that moment on, they won't be reading your mind. They'll be wondering if you already read theirs. Law 1. The trap they never expect you to escape. A master manipulator doesn't fear strong people. They fear people they can no longer predict. The reason most victims never escape isn't because the manipulator is smarter. It's because they keep reacting exactly the way they're expected to. They argue when provoked. They defend themselves when accused. They explain every decision. Without realizing it, every emotional reaction gives the manipulator another piece of information to exploit. That is the real trap. It isn't built with lies. It's built with your predictable responses. Machiavelli recognized that the greatest advantage in any conflict belongs to the person who controls the rhythm of the game. The moment your opponent knows how you'll respond, they stop taking risks. They simply press the same psychological buttons until you defeat yourself. Every emotional outburst, every desperate explanation, and every attempt to prove your innocence strengthens the very strategy being used against you. Imagine someone at work who constantly throws subtle insults disguised as jokes. Every time you defend yourself, they smile, because the conversation immediately shifts to your reaction instead of their behavior. Soon, everyone begins discussing your emotions rather than their manipulation. They never needed to win the argument. They only needed you to play the role they prepared for you. That changes today. The next time someone tries to pull you into an emotional trap, refuse to follow the script. Don't rush to justify yourself. Don't react on command. Let silence interrupt the pattern they spent months learning. A manipulator depends on familiarity. The instant your behavior becomes impossible to anticipate, their confidence begins collapsing because their strategy no longer produces the expected result. Hear that again. The fastest way to break psychological control is to stop giving predictable reactions. Your greatest weapon is not a clever comeback. It is disciplined unpredictability. The moment they realize they can no longer control your emotions, they are forced to reveal their own. That is when the balance of power quietly shifts in your favor. Because every manipulator prepares for resistance. Very few prepare for someone who refuses to play the game at all. Law 2. Make them question their own game. Manipulators hate one thing more than being exposed. They hate losing certainty. Their greatest advantage is confidence. They believe they know exactly how you'll respond because they've spent weeks, months, sometimes years studying your emotions. They know which accusations make you defensive, which compliments lower your guard, and which fears keep you trapped. That certainty becomes the foundation of every move they make. Take that certainty away, and the entire game begins to collapse. Machiavelli understood that power rarely belongs to the person who speaks the loudest. It belongs to the one who quietly forces everyone else to rethink their position. The strongest strategist doesn't rush to overpower an opponent. They introduce uncertainty until the opponent begins questioning the very strategy they once trusted. A doubtful mind cannot execute a confident plan. Imagine a manipulative colleague who constantly interrupts your ideas during meetings because they expect you to argue back. Instead of reacting, you calmly ask, "What solution would you suggest?" The room immediately shifts. Attention moves away from defending yourself and toward their ability to justify their criticism. For the first time, they become the one under pressure. The trap they designed quietly turns around. That is psychological reversal. The person asking the right question often controls the entire conversation. Never rush to defend yourself against every accusation. Calmly invite the other person to explain theirs. Ask for specifics. Ask for evidence. Ask them to clarify contradictions. Manipulators depend on emotional chaos, because chaos prevents careful thinking. The moment you replace emotion with calm curiosity, they begin running out of places to hide. Do not argue. Do not chase. Observe. The calmer you remain, the more uncomfortable they become. They expected emotional resistance. They prepared for excuses. They rehearsed your reactions long before the conversation even started. What they never prepared for was someone who refused to follow the script. That is where confidence changes sides. A manipulator who starts questioning their own strategy becomes slower, less decisive, and far more likely to expose their real intentions without realizing it. Remember this: never waste energy trying to win every argument. Instead, quietly make them wonder whether they were ever in control to begin with. Because once doubt enters the manipulator's mind, their greatest weapon begins working against them instead of against you. Leave a like and comment one step ahead if you're learning to think like a strategist. Law 3. Turn their confidence into their weakness. Every manipulator has one fatal flaw. Eventually, they become too confident. After controlling enough people, they begin believing they're untouchable. They assume every conversation will end the same way. Every confrontation will follow the same pattern, and every person will eventually surrender under pressure. That confidence slowly transforms into arrogance, and arrogance is where their strategy begins falling apart. Most people never notice this. Instead of observing, they panic. They react emotionally, argue endlessly, or desperately try to expose the manipulator. Ironically, that is exactly what the manipulator expects. The more emotional you become, the more certain they feel that they're still controlling the situation. Machiavelli understood that overconfidence blinds even the most intelligent opponent. A person who believes victory is guaranteed eventually stops paying attention to small details. They underestimate quiet people. They overlook subtle changes. They become so convinced of their own superiority that they fail to recognize when the balance of power has already shifted. Imagine a supervisor who constantly intimidates employees because nobody has ever challenged them calmly. Every meeting follows the same routine. They interrupt, dominate the discussion, and expect everyone to back down. Then, one employee remains completely composed, asks direct questions, requests clear explanations, and refuses to be emotionally provoked. The supervisor suddenly hesitates. Their usual tactics stop producing the expected results. Confidence begins turning into frustration because the script no longer works. That is the turning point. Arrogance always creates blind spots. Never announce that you've figured someone out. Let them continue believing they're one step ahead. The longer they underestimate you, the more information they reveal without realizing it. Listen carefully. Watch their habits. Notice the moments they become careless. People expose their greatest weaknesses when they stop believing they have anything left to fear. Patience defeats pride. Observation defeats impulse. Discipline defeats manipulation. Your objective is not to overpower the manipulator. Your objective is to let their own certainty become the reason they lose control. Because the person who believes they cannot fail eventually stops protecting themselves from failure. And once that happens, they begin creating the very opportunity you've been waiting for. The next lesson reveals why breaking a manipulator's routine is often enough to make their entire strategy collapse before your eyes. Law 4. Break the pattern they depend on. Every manipulator survives on one invisible advantage: routine. They carefully build patterns around you until your behavior becomes completely predictable. They know how long it takes before you apologize. They know which insults make you defend yourself. They know when you'll forgive, when you'll hesitate, and when you'll eventually give them another chance. They don't control you through strength. They control you through repetition. That is why their strategy keeps working. Not because it's brilliant, because it has become familiar. Machiavelli understood that every successful strategy depends on expectation. The moment expectations disappear, confidence begins disappearing with them. A manipulator prepares for habits, not surprises. They invest months creating emotional routines, because routines allow them to predict the outcome before the conversation even begins. Think about someone who constantly pressures you into making quick decisions. Every time they create urgency, you immediately respond. They have learned that panic shortens your thinking. Now imagine answering differently. Instead of rushing, you calmly say, "I'll think about it and let you know tomorrow." Suddenly the pressure loses its effect. They expected speed. You introduced patience. The entire rhythm changes. That single interruption matters. Hear that again. One broken pattern can destroy years of psychological conditioning. Manipulators hate uncertainty because uncertainty forces them to improvise. The more they improvise, the more mistakes they make. They reveal frustration. They become impatient. They start abandoning subtle tactics in favor of obvious pressure because the methods that once worked are no longer producing results. Do not reward manipulation with familiar reactions. Delay your response. Change your routine. Refuse to argue at the moment they expect conflict. Walk away when they expect you to stay. Remain calm when they expect anger. Each unexpected decision weakens the psychological map they spent so long building inside their mind. Eventually, they stop feeling in control because the person they thought they understood no longer exists. That is where freedom begins. Not when they change. When you do. A manipulator cannot dominate a game whose rules keep changing. Once their pattern breaks, their confidence follows. Without predictable reactions, they lose the leverage they depended on from the very beginning. Because the strongest trap is never the one they build around you. It is the one you unknowingly repeat every single day. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and comment strategist. Law 5. Force them to reveal their real face. The greatest mistake you can make with a manipulator is exposing them too early. Most people think the answer is confrontation. They gather evidence, point out every lie, and expect the manipulator to suddenly admit the truth. That almost never happens. A skilled manipulator has spent years perfecting denial, excuses, and emotional redirection. The moment they feel cornered, they simply become a better actor. That is exactly what they want. Machiavelli understood that revealing your intentions before the right moment only warns your opponent that the game has changed. Once they know you're watching, they become more careful. They hide their motives, tighten their strategy, and force you back into the same cycle of doubt and frustration. The smarter approach is different. Let them believe their performance is still working. Imagine a business partner who constantly takes credit for your ideas behind closed doors. Instead of confronting them immediately, you begin documenting every conversation, involving more people in important discussions, and calmly asking them to repeat their claims in front of others. Suddenly, The confidence they once displayed starts disappearing. Their stories become inconsistent. Their excuses become rushed. The pressure doesn't come from your accusations. It comes from their own contradictions. Truth becomes powerful when people uncover it themselves. Manipulators survive in darkness because nobody questions their version of events. The moment you create an environment where honesty becomes unavoidable, they begin exposing themselves without realizing it. The more they talk, the more mistakes they make. The harder they try to protect the mask, the more cracks begin appearing across it. Stay patient. Stay observant. Stay emotionally detached. Never interrupt someone determined to reveal their own character. Let arrogance make them careless. Let pressure make them inconsistent. Let silence become the space where their real intentions slowly rise to the surface. Your objective is not revenge. It is clarity. Once you clearly see who someone truly is, difficult decisions become surprisingly easy. You stop negotiating with false promises. You stop believing carefully rehearsed apologies. Most importantly, you stop confusing potential with reality. That is the final advantage. A manipulator can deceive you only as long as you keep believing the mask. The moment you recognize the face behind it, the illusion disappears forever, and so does their power over you. Law 6. The move that ends the game forever. Every manipulator believes one thing. No matter what happens, you will come back. They expect another argument, another apology, another chance, another emotional reaction. Every cycle you've repeated in the past becomes evidence that you'll repeat it again. That belief is the foundation of their confidence. They don't fear losing control, because history has taught them they never truly lose you. That is why the final move catches them completely off guard. Most people think the ultimate victory is exposing the manipulator, humiliating them, or making them admit what they've done. That only keeps you emotionally tied to the game. The more you chase revenge, the more attention you continue giving the very person you're trying to escape. Machiavelli understood that the strongest victory is the one that removes your opponent's ability to influence your future. Real power is not proving that you were right. Real power is reaching a point where their actions no longer determine your decisions. The game ends the moment they lose access to your attention, your emotions, and your time. Picture someone who spent years controlling every conversation you had. They knew exactly which words would trigger guilt, anger, or self-doubt. Then one day, everything changes. You stop defending yourself. You stop explaining your choices. You stop chasing closure they were never willing to give. Your silence is no longer emotional. It is intentional. For the first time, they cannot predict your next step, because there isn't one left for them to control. That is the move they never prepare for. Hear that again. The greatest revenge is becoming unreachable. Not physically, psychologically. Stop seeking validation from people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop reopening doors that have repeatedly led to the same pain. Protect your attention like a valuable asset, because every minute spent feeding manipulation is a minute stolen from building your own future. Choose peace over proving a point. Choose distance over drama. Choose discipline over revenge. The moment you become emotionally unavailable to manipulation, every tactic they once relied on begins losing its power. Their traps remain exactly the same, but the person walking into them no longer exists. That is how every psychological game truly ends, not when the manipulator changes, when you become someone they can no longer manipulate. And once that happens, they don't lose the battle, they lose access to you forever. The greatest victory over a manipulator is never proving them wrong. It's reaching the point where they can no longer influence your thoughts, emotions, or decisions. Once you understand the patterns behind manipulation, you stop reacting and start seeing the game before it even begins. Now tell me this, which of these 7 lessons changed the way you think the most? Comment the number below. And if you want to master the psychology of power, influence, and human nature, subscribe now. Every video on this channel gives you another advantage most people never realize exists. Remember, the moment they can no longer predict you is the moment they can no longer control you. I'll see you in the next video.